This is Murder in the Morning with Tony Bruschi and Stacey Cole.
All right, let's dive into the latest chapter of the Menendez brothers' decades-long legal drama. Because, I mean, let's be honest here. This case has more twists and turns than a primetime crime series. So here's where things stand. Because everybody's like, well, when are they going to get out? I mean, that was kind of the thought process here. I mean, wasn't it, Stacey? It was like, we were talking about this the other day, where it's like, well, it'll be Thanksgiving, then it'll be Christmas. And now it's like, will it be ever?
Yeah, we've been talking about that for a couple of months now. It looked like there was going to be, and this was before the election, it looked like they were probably going to get out. Now, with the election, incoming, I'm going to call him dude for lack of a better term in front of my face right now, he said, I need to take a look at things. I need to see what's what here. And so now it's in different hands than it was before.
Yeah. George Gascon was the previous one. Sounds like a Disney, like.
It does. Well, yeah, you're thinking of, what do you think? Beauty and the Beast.
What's the name of the character there? It's something like that, isn't it?
Gascon.
It is Gascon. Oh,
yeah.
No shit. Well, that's where my mind went.
Absolutely.
Who is Gascon in Beauty and the Beast? Is that?
I need to look that up because that's one of my favorite.
And you don't know the answer to the question, and it's one of your favorite.
Well,
are you kidding me? Are you serious? I'm kidding.
Gascon is kind of the bully.
Okay.
But I don't know what his actual title is.
He's okay.
Kind of.
I'll let you figure that out.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Gaston, not Gascon. Gaston.
Oh, so close.
Very close.
Okay.
Yes, he's a chauvinistic hunter.
Well, that doesn't say. Yeah, that doesn't.
He wanted to be Belle's husband. He asked for Belle's hand in marriage, even by force if necessary.
He's the other guy that's trying to go after her, and the Beast ends up winning out. Okay. So,
correct.
Okay, I'm glad we've established the storyline of Beauty and the Beast.
Yes, thank you.
California Governor Gavin Newsom has officially told the state parole board to take a good, hard look at Lyle and Erik Menendez to determine whether they still pose a danger to the public. And that's a pretty significant move, considering these two have spent nearly 35 years in prison after being convicted of the 1989 murders of their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, inside their ultra-luxurious Beverly Hills mansion. I would say Robin Leach, but only about 20% of the people will get it. Now, if you're thinking, wait, didn't we already figure this out back in the 90s? Yeah. You're not alone. We thought we did. But apparently we were stupid back then, and we've realized a lot of things that we should have just basically known. Boys can be molested. We didn't think that happened back in the 90s. I mean, we did, but we just didn't socially talk about it. So if we didn't say it out loud, it couldn't be true, could it? That's kind of how a lot of the 90s and previous decades worked. If you didn't say it out loud, it can't be true. Just don't talk about it. The case has been picked apart, debated, and re-examined for decades, and yet here we are, still talking about it. Why? Because like any good true crime story, the Menendez brothers case isn't just about crime itself. It's about money, power, family dysfunction, and whether or not the justice system got it right the first time. Their attorneys, well, they're pretty well known. Mark Geragos is one of them, and Cliff Gardner. They are taking the governor's decision as a win. Though, to be clear, this isn't a golden ticket to freedom. Newsom's order doesn't mean clemency or automatic parole. Okay? It just ensures that a proper risk assessment is done to see if these two are still considered dangerous after all of these years. And because bureaucracy loves to take its time, there's no official deadline for when the parole board will actually make up its mind. In the meantime, the legal process just keeps rolling along with no clear finish line in sight for the brothers as of this moment in time. But where does it go? Not everyone is on board with the idea of considering the Menendez brothers' fate. Some are happy that they are behind bars. Enter the Los Angeles District Attorney Nathan Huckman, that's the new guy, who has been very vocal about his opposition to granting them a new trial. Keep in mind, the guy right before him in that same position, he was like, let's let him out. And now this guy's like, whoa, 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 I'm in charge now. I don't care what he said. Let's keep them in. But the previous person in this place got the ball in motion, and now it's up to a judge. It is not up to Hochman right now. But if the judge kicks it back, then we're back in that territory of, yeah, it's back up to Hochman. Or the governor granting clemency, which the sign of what Newsom's doing right now kind of gives us the tea leaves, if we're reading them, that says he's probably going to go down that route if it doesn't play out for freedom this other way. Anyway, the new attorney for the area, however, he is playing it a little cooler when it comes to resentencing, meaning he hasn't ruled out clemency completely, you know. And that's like if he got a head injury and suddenly he didn't know what he was doing, then he'd say they're good.
Right?
Like, hasn't ruled it out completely. I could come into work tomorrow and have hit my head against a wall and suddenly I'm saying crazy things. So, and that's a key detail because resentencing could basically and drastically change the course of the case. See, in recent years, Lyle and Erik have been throwing every legal argument they can at the wall to see what sticks. They've sought clemency from the governor, a resentencing hearing, and even a retrial based upon new support for their long-standing claims of abuse at the hands of their father. And here's where things start to get really complicated. Back in the 90s, prosecutors dismissed their allegations of sexual abuse as a desperate excuse to justify cold-blooded murder. But in the last few years, members of the extended Menendez family have come forward saying they actually believe the brothers were telling the truth about the abuse all along. And that shift in support has reignited the debate over whether these killings were premeditated or an act of two deeply traumatized kids who saw no other way out. Of course, Hochman, well, he isn't exactly buying it. He made it clear that he finds the brothers' claims suspicious, pointing out inconsistencies in their statements over the years. In his response to their 2023 habeas petition, he essentially told the court that nothing new has been brought to the table that would justify reopening the case. According to him, their testimonies don't quite add up, and the core argument that they killed their parents out of fear rather than greed just doesn't hold water, according to him. And that letter doesn't, he says it's not admissible, not that he's holding court, but he's basically saying it's bunk, then it doesn't mean anything. The letter about the abuse. But the Menendez defense team is not backing down. They argue that the justice system failed the brothers, not just during the original trial, but in the decades since. According to them, key evidence about their alleged abuse was excluded from the 1996 trial, painting an incomplete picture of what led to the murders. Instead, prosecutors leaned hard into the spoiled rich kids angle, convincing the jury that Lyle and Erik executed their parents simply because they didn't want to wait for their inheritance. That version of the events is what landed them where they are today. Life sentences without the possibility of parole. And it's defined public perception of the case ever since. Here's another part where it gets interesting. There's a hearing coming up in March that could possibly change everything. If the court agrees to resentence the Menendez brothers, they could suddenly become eligible for parole. And that's up to a parole board. Just imagine the headlines that would make. Back when George Gascon was in charge of the LA District Attorney's Office, he actually recommended reducing their sentence to 50 years to life, which would have at least given them a shot at parole. But now that Hochman's in charge, that possibility is looking murky at best. But it's going out there now to the judge because of the previous actions of the Beauty and the Beast anti-hero Gascon. And let's not forget that Hochman isn't making this decision in a vacuum. As part of the review process, he's combing through thousands of pages of prison records, talking to the Menendez family, who most of them say let him out, except for I think like one, and weighing public sentiment because, yes, public perception matters in cases like this. Because, you know, Hochman, he's got everything to lose in this, not a lot to gain. His party And that's unfortunately how this is being played out. They're thinking maybe they should stay in, at least at a high number. The other side, they're thinking, let's have some grace here. These kids were traumatized and molested. Speaking of public perception, the Menendez brothers' story has seen a resurgence in recent years, thanks in no small part to the true crime documentaries and all the deep dives out there, and people just rediscovering this case that never heard it, weren't alive when it happened the first time. A whole new generation of people who weren't there when these murders happened are now possibly the people who are going to push to help them find freedom. So what happens next? Now, the Menendez brothers remain exactly where they've been for the past 3 decades, behind bars, waiting for the legal system to decide their fate yet again. Whether they walk free or stay locked up for life, one thing is for certain, this is not going to be going away anytime soon. Where do you think it's going to go, Stace?
I know where I'd like it to go.
Yeah.
Where do I think it's going to go? I don't want to put any money on this one, but I think they're going to remain behind bars. I hope I'm wrong. But I guess I say this a lot. When you know better, you do better. You should anyway. Mm-hmm. And I feel like by today's standards, I feel like we know better. We know that abuse and trauma and mental health can really play a big role. And back in the 90s, we pretended to know that, but we didn't act that way. We talked about mental health, but I think we know a lot more now. And if these 2 kids, young adults, were truly abused, I can see how they could have snapped. It doesn't make it right, but what I feel in my heart is maybe they've done their time. If this were 2 years into their sentence, no.
Sure.
No, but we're talking 30 years. And they've been model prisoners. They had some pretty messed up upbringing.
Yeah.
And there's some people who can actually point to things that happened in their lives and say, I witnessed this. I saw it. So what their story is true.
And you have other witnesses, other people who can have the same story of their dad.
Yes.
The Menudo member who's come forward. And allegedly there's other members, too, of Menudo who have stories that have not come forward. So you have that as well. I think society still has it out for people that they view as like spoiled rich kids or rich people in general, that it's always, and it's a jealousy type thing, and it's not healthy. But I remember growing up with that type of attitude and that type of attitude with people around me. And it was, because we were not rich, but a lot of times, people around that, then at least in where I grew up, it was very much like, people would like just look for reasons to like insult the people who were like successful in the community. It's a really sick way of looking at things, but it's how it was. And this is like, it's in you. And then you think, well, this is how you act. And, but it's really kind of sick, because I think even though these kids are like, look, we've been molested and raped by our father. Yeah, but you got everything. You're spoiled. You have all this. And yeah, they did, but it doesn't make up for that shit. And why do you think they were acting out and robbing homes and doing shit like that in their teenage years when they had everything? They were crying out for attention. Now, does it make it right? Is that how you should go about getting the help that you need? Not at all. But nobody's going to hear them at that point in time. The family sure as hell's not going to let that get out. So they felt trapped, and they were acting out, and they were robbing people and shit like that. They weren't great kids, but when you're being raped by your parent and your mom is complicit in it, knowing what's going on, but still like, well, that's just how we do things around here, honey. And for the sake of the image of the family, let's Jose keep doing it. Yeah, it'd be pretty fucked. And I get why one at some point in time, after your brain is so messed up because that's your normal, you'd get a shotgun and blow their heads off. I kind of see it.
People get to the breaking point.
Yeah, I see it. I get it. Never been there myself, thank God, but I can understand it. I can empathize it. That's fucking horrible.
I've shared a couple of times, probably where people go, too much information, but I've shared a few times that my upbringing was pretty horrific. I personally didn't have horrible things happen to me. I witnessed them. My dad did some really horrific things, and then there are things that I think he did that I don't have proof of, but watching one of my brothers melt down and completely lose his shit and the other brother climb into a shell, I think I figured out what happened. I think one of my brothers was sexually abused by my dad. There was a time when that brother was plotting to kill my dad.
Yeah.
And it was back, this was in the 80s. So it was about this time. And just, there was no way for us to go to anybody. We couldn't go to a neighbor. We couldn't go to a teacher. We couldn't do anything about it. We really felt like we had nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And looking back, it sounds horrific to say it out loud. And I absolutely remember the moment when we had this discussion in the basement talking about how we were going to get the gun. I mean, I was 7 years old at the time.
Yeah.
And it was just a very matter-of-fact discussion. You get driven to a place where right and wrong doesn't make sense anymore, but just how do we survive this situation and how do we make this pain stop?
That's survival. Yeah. That's
exactly.
Yeah. When you're in that mode.
It doesn't make sense and it doesn't sound right, but I think your brain shuts down a bit and you have nowhere else to go. Now, we didn't do it.
Yeah.
We didn't do it. Is that the difference between us and the Menendez brothers? I don't know. But everybody has their own way of coping. And I think when you get pushed into the corner hard enough, you figure out a way to either get out or you shut down completely and allow it to happen. And I don't mean allow it to happen as, victims, it's your fault. You just shut down and try to find a way to get through it.
Yeah.
I'm never going to victim shame. I've been there myself.
Yeah,
But
it's
I think
eventually
you figure out how to get through it.
Yeah, your faculties just kind of shut down, and it's like, how am I going to survive this? And sometimes surviving at that moment in times means doing nothing, because you don't have any outlets to go to. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, and I hear people on this case go, well, I wouldn't have, like, were you brutally raped by your father, like, repeatedly while he did it to other young boys around that are in part of his record label, yet you're looked at as prized possession, so you're getting all these signals this one way, and then the next way, that's happening to you. And then God knows what kind of a disciplinarian the guy is, and it didn't sound like he was very good at that. I mean, it sounded like he was extreme at that. And then everybody's looking at you like, oh, you live this perfect life. And really, you are living in hell.
And having millions or billions of dollars doesn't mean that you have a perfect life.
No.
Those of us who run out and go, I got to go grab a Powerball ticket because, wow, it's $215 million. Yeah, I'm guilty here. Thinking that if I won that $215 million, my life would suddenly be perfect.
Yeah.
That's not how it works.
No.
And I think a lot of people think that if you've got tons and tons of money, everything else that's wrong in your world just goes away and is better. No, that's not how it works.
As Diddy says, more money, more problems.
And Tony wraps it up like that.
To link Diddy into this case, because
wow, dude,
there has not been a link to Diddy yet here, but it can happen.
The latest true crime stories, expert breakdowns, and shocking twists, all in one place. Press subscribe now to the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today.